Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are very well. We've got an exciting episode today. It's a bit of a Q&A episode, but it's mainly focused around pivoting, around shifting where revenue comes from. It is kind of if you're in a bit of a transitional phase, these questions might be on your mind. These are some questions that clients have sort of swung my way recently, or there's a couple of questions that I know I do get asked when people are thinking about pivoting that we've added in there as well. So we've got 7 questions to get through. But I think if you're in this period of maybe moving, shifting, then this episode and actually the next episode following this will be really helpful. I'm going to do 2 episodes kind of based on this, but this episode is going to be a Q&A one. And hopefully we'll dive into some things. So question number one is, what are the key indicators that it's the right time to explore a new revenue stream? This comes up quite a lot when people are wondering, like, should I, shouldn't I? Is it time for us to add something into the mix? Is it not? I'd say there's a few things. One, if you feel like you have exhausted your capacity in certain revenue streams. Now, that might be a legitimate reason, e.g. capacity is a real thing in the sense of it's one-on-one and you can't just be adding loads and loads of people to your one-on-one practice. It might be that you don't want to have a certain container with hundreds of people in or thousands of people in. It also might be energetically, you've kind of like had enough of it and you're a bit like, I feel like a bit kind of had enough. Those can be excuse me, some indicators that it would be time to explore a new revenue stream. I think what's maybe more helpful is to think about what aren't valid indicators. So for me, what isn't a valid indicator is you've had a failed launch and it didn't really go how you wanted it to. Not really worth validating new revenue streams, in my opinion. You are having a really bad month and it's just not feeling great. I wouldn't say that that's relevant. If you've had team members leave and then you're like, right, well, let's just start this new revenue stream. It's like, no, fix the issue that you've got rather than just diverting to create a new problem. If you've gone to an event, a retreat, something where there's a lot of ideas being shared and you're all of a sudden like, right, let's do this thing. That for me is not an indicator that I'd be like, yeah, let's do it. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying you've got to be really careful of like where you're spending your time and where you're spending your energy. So that would be my answer to that question. Question number 2 is, the person here was asking me, should I keep adding a new side to the business? So they had like 2 clear sides to their business, 2 different areas, and they were considering putting a third one in the mix. And they were basically asking me, should I do that or should I scale what I've got going on? And many of you will be in this position where you're kind of figuring that out. Like, you're kind of like, do I scale it or do we add something else? And what I would say to that is, normally my answer is scale what you've got going on. However, if you're a location dependent business, i.e. you operate within a certain geographical location, sometimes it can make sense to add other things into the mix to then be able to serve sort of a customer base on a more deeper level, and essentially you're increasing the average spend. That isn't the sort of be all and end all of that conversation, but it can be an interesting way to look at it. Most of the time, my answer to that question is scale what you've got going on. But for some people, they might want to add something into the mix, and that's totally fine. Also, for some people, it might be that your business has gotten to a point where it can now exist without you, or without you to some degree. And so you've now freed up time, and now you're thinking, well, what can I do with that time? And you might want to add a new revenue stream in, which if you do, cool, do that. I would just say make sure that you've got a machine that's running well, that you've got SOPs in place, that you've got a real solid system that's working, and then add something in. Question number 3 is, what strategies can I employ to effectively communicate a pivot to my existing customers? This is a really good question. Really, really, really good question. Because often we have got this issue where you've got an existing group of people, can be customers, clients, stakeholders, and if you're going to pivot your business or what you're doing day to day, that can sometimes be a bit conflicted, and you're sort of worried, are you going to lose all your clients? Are they going to get it? Are they going to hate it? Like, what's going on there? And so I would say what you need to do is take them along on the journey. So don't just one day come out of nowhere and be like, ta-da, here we go, here's the new thing. Because people will get confused by that, and people don't love change most of the time. But you do have an amazing opportunity on your hands where you can take people along with you on this journey of pivoting and get them bought in from the start. You know, whether that's taking them behind the scenes via Instagram stories, whether that's vlogging, whether that's writing a written email diary, like it can be in whatever format you want it to be, but really getting people to buy into where you're going and helping them feel like they're on that journey with you will not only get people on board and understanding what you're doing, but will actually often turn them into like your biggest advocates and the biggest people who are like, oh yeah, she's doing this and she did do this, but now she's moving to that. And you can really shift the energy, and that's really effective change management. And when we look at marketing and change management and how do we do that for, you know, external stakeholders, that is one of the ways to do it really, really well. The other thing I would say is have a big enough runway. Like, give people time to understand what's going on, but also don't give them too long. Because if you give them too long, they kind of get bored and fatigued. What I mean is like, give them a period where you say the business is going through a change, or we're currently working on new services, or we're working on a different part of the business. Like, that's fine to be saying like month out, 2 months out, weeks out, like that's fine. Just don't kind of say a year in advance, like, right, well, we think by like 2 years' time the business won't exist and it's going to turn into this and turn into that, because that is off-putting for people and they're not really connected to it in any way, because like, what's in it for them? There's nothing in it for them. It doesn't make sense. Question number 4. This is something that most people don't do, but it would be good if they did. And so maybe you can take this and run with it. So question number 4 is, how do I evaluate the financial feasibility of launching a new product or service? Again, this is so important. Many people will launch a new product or service or pivot into a new space or change where their revenue is coming from in their business, and they fail to work out what is the profit margin of it, how feasible is it, does it make business sense, how much more money are you going to make or less money are you going to make from what you're already doing. This needs to be super clear. So when you're talking about how do you evaluate it, what you need to look at is, what are you earning now? What's the earning potential of this new situation? Do they blend together or are they separate? You need to understand what is like the raw operating kind of profit from whatever it is that you're going to offer. And then what's the like realistic profit margin once you've got all of your expenses and once you're thinking about the impact that that's going to have on your time, etc., to really understand what this is. Because it's not that every pivot we make has to better the business. Like, it's not like you have to make more money, because some people don't. They want to make less money and have an easier life. But what you do need to understand is, where is the money coming from? And at what expense and cost to you, the business, team members, is that going to create for you? And then the other thing you need to think about is your cash flow long term. And have you got any buffer? Have you got a period of adjustment? Have you got any kind of situation in place which is going to allow for teething problems to occur or for people to catch on with what it is that you're doing? Number 5 is, what KPIs, so key performance indicators, should I monitor during a business pivot? This question is an absolute gem of a question. Very few people ask this, but someone did ask me this, and I was like, this is such a good question. So a key performance indicator, for anyone who's, you know, not maybe sure, is a way of measuring something. It's something that you're going to track. It's normally connected to an objective you have in your business so that you can help measure something that you're trying to achieve. And so KPIs allow for you to track the success or the failure of whatever it is that you're trying to achieve longer term. So what KPIs should you monitor during a business pivot? Now, the reason this is a good question is because a lot of the time, a lot of people find that the KPIs that they were using to determine success, and I'm putting success in air quotes, because that's not really utter success, but hey ho, we can call it that. Often they become redundant, or they change, or they're not fully, like, they're not really showing us the full picture. And so people sometimes wonder, like, well, do we just stop tracking altogether? or is there something that we can do? What I would suggest you do is you look at the connectivity to your marketing, as in on whatever platform you choose to communicate on, social, email, whatever it is that you use. Are people staying engaged? Now, it's very normal for people to not. And if you don't give people a reason to, then why would they? And typically, it's not the pivot that's causing people to disengage. It's that the energy has been shifted from focusing on creating amazing content to focusing on this pivot, which naturally means there's not the same amount of energy there to nurture that email or the social or whatever it is that you're doing. And therefore, often people are just switching off, and it's got nothing to do with the pivot. It's just not, you're not providing anything that's that valuable. Now, what you could track is, can you maintain that interest? Can you maintain the level of connectivity? That's something that's interesting for you to track, and is something that I would advise you to look at, especially in terms of having an audience to sell to later down the line. The other KPIs you could track are, what are the new KPIs we need to look at for this new service, and how can we start tracking them before the service actually, or product, or whatever the shift in revenue comes from? How do we track that? So, for example, do you need to target a different target audience? If the answer is yes, then your KPIs during the pivot need to be around that target audience and building that audience, because ultimately we want an audience there to sell to before we even launch anything. So really thinking about, okay, what will we be tracking in 6 months' time? And how can we sort of mini track that now? Or how can we find some kind of nice match to tracking that? The other thing I would say your KPIs can really look at is sales. So up until the point of you pivoting, pivots don't happen overnight. Often you're changing, or you're shifting revenue, or maybe you're a done for you service provider, but you're switching to a more advisory consultant role. That normally happens over a period of 3 months, 6 months, a year. Sometimes it takes ages for people to do that, and that's fine. Like, there's no rush with it. What I would be tracking from a KPI perspective is, where are the sales coming from? What is it that you're actually selling? What's the value of the sale? And where are the leads coming from to generate that sale? And then, are you enjoying delivering that? And I would be tracking that consistently and starting pinpointing data points to see, where can you find similarities? Where can you see things that are showing opportunities? Where can you see trends that are actually quite interesting that maybe you haven't looked at? And that can tell a lot about a business from what's selling, even when they're not sort of organically or from a paid advertisement perspective pushing it per se. Number 6, we're flying through these questions today. Number 6 is, how do I maintain customer loyalty during a period of change? Again, such an important question. Now, we mentioned this slightly earlier about the behind the scenes stuff, the content, and sharing them and getting them brought in on the journey. However, the other things you can do is, being really open and honest about what is happening is really good. So if you can say, right, we're going through this change, or we're moving platform, or we're doing this, please bear with us, and have this open conversation with them, that can really work well. The other thing is giving them an incentive for them to understand why it is that you're making this change. So most of the time in a business, we're making this change because it's going to benefit the client somehow. So you can communicate that with them. Now, you don't have to openly communicate and say, this is, we are doing this for you. Like, it doesn't need to be like that. But it can be really helpful for you to say, like, the business is moving in this direction. The reason for that is because of X, Y, and Z. The impact of that for you is going to be X, Y, and Z, and helping people understand, like, what is the overall mission of the business? What is the vision of it all? And that is important because it always comes back to this stuff, right? Like, it's always about, what is the longer term plan? What is the focus point? The other thing I would say is, be open and honest with what people can expect. So don't say to them that you're going to email them every day if you're not. Maybe you have emailed them every day for 5 years, but then you're going to go through a period where that's not sustainable, so you're only going to email them once a week for the next 6 weeks. Tell them that. Say, I really appreciate your patience in this time. I am going to be available 1 day a week, or we'll be sending you an email 1 day a week. blah, like blah, 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 and really have expectation set. If you expectation set with clients, with stakeholders, with customers, with community members, immediately that relieves lots of pressure from people. It immediately helps to just like chill and just kind of like breathe a bit. And that's really, really helpful. Number 7, the final question, we've got, how do you build demand for a new pivot? This is another thing that's very interesting and something that you need to do. So if you're pivoting your business, and it's quite a big pivot, as in you're going from serving one group of people to another group of people, or you're delivering a certain service and actually the new service is completely different, then realistically you need to build demand, because you're going to have to work out who's going to buy this new thing. And what I see happen all the time is people who choose to just not do this, launch the thing, think everyone's going to join, magically, realize that people haven't joined, but it's because there's no demand for it. So how do you build demand for a new pivot? You start a wait list. You create hype around what it is that you're selling. You or yourself are excited by it. The amount of people who are not excited by what they're selling, it's like, it's no surprise that it's not selling, because you're not really interested. You talk really openly about why other people should be interested. Like, what is in it for them? How is it going to help them? Why does it exist? All of these real core sales activities that is like normal stuff, but it needs to be really, really clear. I also would say that if you're trying to build demand for something that's new, focus on the idea of selling one thing to one person at one time, and really like laser focusing in on that, because that will help you build a core initial startup group of people who really get what it is you do, rather than having a larger group, but there's people that are kind of like half in, half out. So can you really segment a certain type of person, or can you really look at who do you actually want to work with in this new era of your business? And that's a really powerful thing to explore. Like, really map out them as a human being, understand what do they want, understand what do they need. And that is a process that will help you create content that actually talks to somebody, rather than not really talking to anybody. The other thing to do in terms of building demand for a new pivot is giving yourself a long enough time to actually build the demand in itself. So don't just a week before you're going to pivot start doing this. We need to be doing this like months before, and helping people understand that something is on its way. The other thing to build demand is to show people things. So rather than just telling them about whatever's happening, show them visuals, diagrams, things that they can tangibly hold, maybe if that's applicable to you, some kind of flyer or something where people actually understand what it is that you're saying to them, can really, really help. Now, if you are someone who is pivoting and you're shifting where your revenue comes from every year, every month, I would consider looking at Maze Accelerator as a support container for you to join next year. The reason I say that is because I support a lot of people who are in this process. Either they're like refining their business, or they're pivoting, or they're shifting, and having a space in a container that holds you accountable and actually helps you make sure you show up and keep doing the action consistently week on week really can help make the whole concept of pivoting your business not only achievable, but successful from the off. And I think this is really interesting in the sense of, we've had a number of people now join Maze Accelerator and do really well when they're kind of coming in with a real purpose of like, I know I'm in a transitional phase. And rather than them just letting themselves kind of navigate that themselves, and rather than it just being this like casual, like, oh, we'll just see what happens and how long it takes, once they bring some intentionality to it, and once we can really iron out the core strategy of, all of the different pieces and the moving parts going on, it allows for it to, one, not only occur, but actually be a lot smoother and a lot more engaging for them. They can enjoy a lot more and understand what it is they're doing. I've got a great example, actually, of a client who is in the current cohort of Maze Accelerator. And she is not really pivoting, but she's doing what we discussed earlier about adding something in. So she's adding another element to her business. She's already got two really successful parts of her business, but she's adding another part in. And she's actually adding two parts in. And through May's Accelerator, we've been sort of weighing up and evaluating and helping her plan. And she's the one taking all the action. She's the one that's pushing it forward and moving it through. But she's really started to uncover and make plans, and she's done we're really very much in the middle of this movement of action. But she's really kind of getting clear on what does she want this to be, and what will this be for her in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, rather than just the immediate pivot. And I think this is the really important piece, because it's very easy to just think about like the next 3 months and what does this mean, but actually, especially if you've already got a thriving business like she does, she runs, a multi six-figure business, she's got a good stuff going on, she's got some team members to help her. She has to look at what does it mean beyond where she's at right now, because it can't just be about thinking in a kind of freelancer mindset of like, yeah, we'll do this and we'll do that and we'll do the next thing, because it needs to be cohesive. And so with May's Accelerator, she's been kind of running through things really fast, which is amazing, and really taking action. And she's got sort of two different new elements, completely new revenue streams that are not yet in motion, but she's strongly in the motion of actually preparing them, setting them up, getting all the things sorted. And she's about ready to start generating income from that, which will then add huge amounts of revenue to her business every year. I mean, we're talking six figures, potentially multi six figures plus for the one part. And then the other section she is adding is sort of, as much as she wants it to be, but probably, she could add probably 100 grand a year to her business via that. And that would be really like fun money and exciting money, and money that she could go and do whatever she wanted with in terms of her family and things. And so this is like a really important conversation, because it shouldn't be underestimated. Like, pivoting's fab, adding revenue streams is great, shifting, where your revenue comes from, that's really exciting. But it's also quite a scary time for some people. It's also difficult to get your head around in terms of like, can we do it? Can we not do it? Is it going to make sense? Is it not? So I totally am understanding of where you might be sat right now if you're currently in this phase of trying to work out like, what are you doing? And I really, really suggest that you come and have a conversation with me, and let's work out, is May's Accelerator a fab container for you to be in for 6 months of 2024 to get everything really solidified, sorted, launched if you're at the point of doing that, moving forward, getting new revenue coming in, tweaking. That we can all do inside of May's Accelerator, and enrollment is now open for a January start cohort, which will be cohort 4 of this. So we've ran 3 successful, amazing cohorts, and this will be the 4th one. There's another client. Let's talk about another client, actually, because I know for some of you who are in this position, hearing about clients and how they're managing it can be very helpful, rather than me just contextualizing talking about strategy. So there is another dear client who is fantastic and amazing, who is in the process of rebranding and shifting, and very much doing this thing we talked about in terms of shifting where the revenue's coming from. And she's already done this over a year ago, and we successfully did that. And now she's moving into another iteration of it. And as you move through these iterations, it's beautiful to watch people grow. It's fab as they kind of learn more about themselves, they learn more about their business. And so she is now in the process of rebranding her business and kind of continuing on this movement of entering a different kind of makeup of what her business looks like and what the revenue model of her business looks like. And for her, part of that has been expanding her team and bringing in different people who can take the brunt of the hard work, or do a lot of client delivery. And that's really exciting, because it brings a whole new plethora of challenges, of wins, of different things to look at. And so she's very much on a journey right now of fully solidifying what does that rebrand look like, and also then executing on that and really bringing the kind of brand she's got already and pairing that with the new brand, which I know many of you listening will also be in that situation. And I think it's okay to mention as well that, like, when you're in that process, often you're spending quite a bit of time just thinking, and that can be quite draining, and it can be quite hard. And you do need to think, you do need to kind of figure things out in your head. I'd also encourage you to lean in, though, and take action and just see what happens. Not every piece of action you take has to be the next amazing idea. It's okay if you take action and then actually realize that you're not going to implement further on the action you took, but by doing the action itself can be the catalyst to figuring out what it is you want, rather than just sat thinking, what do I want? What does this need to be? What is this going to look like? And so that is something for you to think about. Hopefully those two examples have kind of inspired you or spurred you on or made you have a think about, yeah, I can do this, or yes, I am in the right direction. As I say, applications are now open for Maze Accelerator, which is hugely exciting. Please come and jump in and ask any questions you've got. You also can have an opportunity to jump on a call with me as well. So should you fill your application at the bottom, you can request a call with me and we can chat and we can work out, is it right for you and where you're at in your business and the plans you've got for pivoting or, you know, changing up what you're doing. I'm more than happy to have a discussion with you and also see if we gel, right? I know some of you listen to this podcast who I don't know. Some of you I know very dearly, which is great, but some of you I don't. So I'm more than happy to have conversations with you, but use this opportunity. It only comes around twice a year to join Maze Accelerator, and it's always a blast. Like, people get so much out of Maze Accelerator. You can go to www.mayjames.com/MA and you will be able to read the sales page and read more about the program over there should you wish to. And there's also a button to apply. Have an amazing week, whatever you're up to. I will see you in the next episode. Take care and speak soon. Bye.